Welcome back to another amazing episode of Card Talk, a podcast where we talk about cards from Lord of the Rings, the card game. I'm your host, Dave Walsh.
And I'm Grant Thompson, just off for a nap.
And I'm Ted Bannock, and I love talking about naps. That's what we're gonna do.
Yeah. What naps do we like talking about, Ted?
We love talking about naps that our patrons take, so we're gonna thank them.
Yeah, we love talking about patron naps. I think that there may be a language thing talking about naps and nappies and things like that, because I think a nappy is a diaper, right, Grant?
Yep.
Yeah, so we got to be careful what we're saying. But anyways, we appreciate all our patron naps. Not our patron nappies, but our patron naps. So let's thank all our patrons: Daniel, David, Jason, Joseph, Justin, Kyle, Lewis, Mike, Dominic, Phil, Rob, Robert, and Sean. We have a whole bunch of patrons, and I will say that if you're interested in becoming a patron and maybe getting a little bit of swag at Con of the Rings from Card Talk, just to let you guys know, I have mocked up the prototype, and I just can't wait to get it out to everybody. It's amazing. But anyways, it's small, but it's definitely will improve your quality of life. But if you're interested, please join us at any amount of money at at patreon.com/cardtalk2018. I'll put the address, the URL right there, and you'll be able to see it. But let's talk cards, because Ted
Let's get a little risque. This episode's going to be risque.
So, Grant, what card are we going to be talking about today?
We're talking about the 3-cost lore event from Shadow and Flame, Risk Some Light. The Secrecy 3 with action. Look at the top 3 cards of the encounter deck. You may select one card and move it to the bottom of the encounter deck. Return any unselected cards to the top of the encounter deck in any order.
Well, Ted, you're the one that wanted to come on and talk about this crazy card, so go ahead. What do you got?
Yeah. Well, I recently put it into a deck for the first time ever. I'm trying to. The set it says is SAF, which I think is that Shadow and Flame. I think is my guess.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yep.
So it's one of the older secrecy cards when they first introduced secrecy in, which I guess is the second cycle. And I finally gave it a play in a Gray Wanderer contract deck, because you start with one hero, so you start in secrecy, no matter which deck you do. So, and I'm running a lore hero, and I said, well, I was looking for kind of just some like odd. I like to like lore events. A lot of lore events are like tricky, like fun things, and I'm like, I've never played this card. Let's try it. And I found it to be quite impactful. Forget this, David. I'm going to say your favorite thing ever, solo play.
What universe are we living in?
Because I didn't realize, so it's with Secrecy 3, so it'll be 0 cost, which is great if you're in Secrecy. Right. And to look at the top 3 cards of the deck, and then you get to put one at the bottom and then rearrange the other 2.
Right.
Putting them back in a order is tremendously powerful. It certainly decreases less with high player counts, because you're scouting a less percentage of the cards coming out. But to be able to do that, you can kind of set up like, okay, I don't want this treachery, so it goes to the bottom of the deck. And then you can set up essentially your one reveal. And potentially, if you're playing solo, it'll also let you set up a shadow card if there's only one enemy, getting a shadow card that round.
Right.
And it lets you avoid a lot of hazards. And I think even in 2-player, this card will still be quite good, because you're going to look at 3 cards, put the one you don't want on the bottom, and then you have your 2-card reveal for 2 players.
Yeah, and I think that kind of the power in solo is that you get to take one card and you get to move it to the bottom of the deck. But then it's the decision of what you want as a shadow card. It doesn't happen all the time where you're only engaged with one enemy. But if you are just, like you said, engaged with one enemy, sometimes instead of putting that treachery on the bottom that you want to get rid of, maybe you put that treachery as the shadow card, and then you don't ever have to deal with it. It already gets discarded.
Right.
I mean, and Grant, this was pre-TED, but I think we talked about this as an option or an alternative to the Palantir when we were talking with Ian Martin, right?
I believe we did.
And so because the Palantir lets you look at the top 3 cards, right? I forget exactly, but
Yep, it's 3 cards for Palantir.
And so we were wondering. We asked Ian why use the Palantir versus this card. And so,
okay.
So Ted, I'll ask you the same question. Why use this card over the Palantir?
Very, very different reasons. 1, Palantir is restricted to nobles. And 2, Palantir takes an action. And 3, Palantir it gives you the benefit of card draw, but also raises your threat. For this being risk some light, it actually has there's no risk in playing it, especially if it's 0. The only thing you need is it's only effective for 1 turn. So it's kind of like if you need a lot of card draw because you're not putting something on the board that's going to stay there. You only get to use its trick for one turn to have its impact. But I will say in a couple games, the impact was so high, I actually paid full cost for it because I was out of secrecy on the last turn of 2 separate games. I said, I have nothing else on my board. I can't, putting an ally down won't help me. It's not going to make that big of an impact. But since I'm making a final push to win the game, how about deciding what the final overturn is going to be? It was so it's helped me close games, even paying full price for it.
And so, is it worth full price? Is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah,
or
actually,
is it only selectively worth.
It depends on the circumstance, but I think it's very good early game. It lets you it's good early, middle, and end game. But early game is especially helpful because when you're struggling with willpower and attacks, it lets you avoid, I can have this treachery come out because it the treachery maybe impacts how many characters you have in play, so you can suffer the effects because you have less characters early on. Or late game where you're like, oh, okay, we can't have this location come out because if this location comes out, it triggers all these other things and we can't win because of the win condition, so you just bury it and you don't deal with it.
Yeah. So Grant, when you're using Risk Some Light, I don't know. Do you use Risk Some Light? Is that a card that typically you run in decks?
Not typically. I have ran Risk Some Light a couple of times over the years. Mainly is an alternative for scrying, so with Dennis Thor or Hennemoth. And it's come in, I wouldn't say it's been absolutely useless, but it
Risk Some Light, not useless. That's the name of the episode.
Right. That's next week's card.
But I can't say it impacted too much in the games I used it in. It worked. It did its job, but it wasn't all that great. I can see the usefulness in it. I just haven't benefited from it.
Here's
David?
Here's the question for both.
Are you going to risk some comments on Risk Some Light?
Well, here's the question for both of you. What cards are you putting in the bottom of the deck? I touched on it a little bit when we were talking about putting a treachery on the bottom of the deck to avoid it, or is there a card type that you want to put on the bottom of the deck? I know that I would probably pick Surge or maybe even an archery card. Despite anything, I probably wouldn't care if it was doomed, depending on the card. Treacheries, sometimes I don't necessarily some treacheries can even whiff. So especially if you're playing solo. So I think that, like when people are playing this card, I think that you have to have in mind the encounter deck and what cards there are that you're trying to avoid and get.
I think it all.
I don't know.
I think it all depends on the quest you're playing, and if you know the quest and you know what you're looking to get rid of. So, for example, if you're playing a Shadow of the Past, you may be looking to get rid of a Black Rider or that one that attaches to a hero and makes you discard it if you fail a high test. You may want to get rid of that. There's a few of them in there that you may want to do.
Right. The latest quest actually has keywords in the victory box where Challenge of the Wayne Riders, where you want to pull off get the straight word, and then you pass that. You get to have the momentum. It's hard to explain. Let me see if I can explain this succinctly. For every stage, if you get 15 progress on a stage, the extra progress that gets to move on to the next stage, provided that you pass the test. You don't need to pass the test to move on to the next stage. Just the extra progress gets to come with you. So if you have 7 extra progress and you get a straight keyword, then that can help you carry the 7 extra progress to the next stage. So passing those tests and rearranging the encounter deck may have even more power in those sorts of quests where you're trying, like hide tests and sailing tests and things like that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I mean, does this card have play outside of the Grey Wanderer contract? Like, what were you doing before this card then, Ted?
I've never played it previously, and it come out at the end of the second cycle, right? So I haven't played the card for like the entire 7 years it's been out or whatever.
Well, then
I always looked at it.
What made you play it then?
So I usually don't play secrecy decks. Like very rarely do I build secrecy decks, especially early on. They weren't as, the card pool wasn't big enough to have like a dedicated secrecy,
workable, right?
Yeah, to have it really be workable and successful to beat a scenario. But I looked at it and I said, okay, I'm running a lore hero and I'm going to be in secrecy for a couple of turns. And, scrying the encounter deck, I said, I'm just going to try it. And then once I played it, same thing with every single card. You don't know the value of it till you play it. You don't see how it impacts.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like Grant made a good point. It can depend on the scenario. So like, for example, I played Ghost of Framsburg, where you're looking for loot cards. And to get loot cards, you need to get locations with Discover.
Right.
So you just want to set up the encounter deck to give you locations. And sometimes it's just as simple as that.
Yeah. And Grant had to bow out because he was sleepy, but that's okay. You could hear Katie snoring in the background again. This episode of Risk Some Light brought to you by Katie snoring. But I think that, as we wrap up the talk of this, is that, it's another way to cancel battle. It's like a pseudo test of will, right? Like,
in a sense,
like encounter scry. And there's times that I've played this card where it's just whiffed, if that makes any sense.
No, how could it ever do that?
Well, because the three cards
three of the exact same treachery cards,
or 3 locations that didn't really matter, like that were not anything that I care.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so there's times where something like this can. I'll say the word whiff, but that means something different than what I mean. But it just doesn't give you as much valuable information as you're hoping for.
Yeah,
you know. But with Stinker coming out and people trying to put Stinker in with Gollum, like you take that.
This would go great with a Smeagol deck because he'll probably fit into a bunch of secrecy decks, right?
Right.
And you have lore
or you can use it to purposely get Smeagol to flip to Gollum and then you can use the shenanigans there too that work out, right? Because if you take, we had Caleb on the show, and if you take undefended attacks and there's no heroes in play, it's like you can
The damage doesn't go anywhere.
Damage doesn't go anywhere, so you can just keep taking your damage undefended and things like that.
That's funny.
Yeah. So I mean, there's some shenanigans you can do.
Yeah. And in my particular deck, I just kind of had room for it. And even when I built secrecy decks, do I immediately reach for Risk Some Light? No, because there's a lot of competition in those decks, because you need things to, keep your threat down. You need powerful allies to make up if you don't have heroes. So secrecy decks are usually full already. So I get why people might not give it a try. But once I did, I was happy with the results, so I wanted to share.
Yeah, and I think that this is great in a particular deck, and I think that it's really good in the Grey Wanderer deck. I think that that's where this card is going to see some really renewed interest.
Yeah. Quick other comments aside from card play itself. I'm not insane. I'm like crazy about the artwork. It's
too magic-y.
No, I think it's just maybe the style of Gandalf or something. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what it is. I like that it's being lit up.
I was gonna say that's the thing that I don't appreciate. It's like never is Lord of the Rings like have like floating swirly flare things happening. It's always just kind of subtle things like turn on and slow. Like this seems very like he casted a magic spell. But that's not what you don't like about it, huh?
Yeah, no, that's actually, well, now that you said that, I see it. It's something else. I think about maybe just how the style of it, and although, and I can't remember which part of the book. Like I know they're in Moria when he does it.
Right.
I don't remember I don't know if the line in the book is the same as in the movie, because I don't remember the book moment, but I remember the movie moment very specifically. And I think Ian McKellen really delivered the line when he's like, "Let's risk some light," and then it shows Moria.
We risk a little more light. Behold, the great realm and dwarf city of Dwarven.
Like this is worth seeing,
right?
Right.
Let us risk some light, and then the Gloria of Moria rolls in. And, but I think we should probably ring this card. What do you think, Ted?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so for anybody new to put
it on the ringer, Dave.
So for anybody new to the show or is looking forward to our opinion on it, we have this little system where we ring a card on a scale from 1 to 10 rings, where 1 ring is the one card to rule them all, and 10 rings is the card that we throw back into the fiery chasm from whence it came. So Ted, your card, you're first. What do you think of Risk Some Light on a scale from 1 to 10?
I want to give it a 4 because I was so surprised at how impactful it was in my games. That could go the other way. Secrecy, it has the downside where once you get out of secrecy, it's expensive. And secrecy, like I said, still has a lot of competition when you're building a secrecy deck. And with the number of players you have, it loses potency as well. But I've also built decks solely around manipulating the encounter deck. And this is something that actually wasn't in it, but it will be for the next go around.
So your final rating is a 4? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I'm going to go with a 4.
Okay.
It's like it does it for like, because it is 0 for secrecy 2. So it does cost a slot in your deck, which some people argue is the true cost. Like what are you not playing?
Right.
But sometimes there are just turns where you're like, okay, this turn is critical. and it lets you dive 3 cards deep and manipulate them for nothing, for 0, ideally.
Right, provided you're in secrecy.
Right.
Yeah. Grant had to bow out for real, and he said that he's going to ring it a 6. So he says 6 rings for this card. And you know what? I think that I'm going to agree, because this is a card that I don't reach for, because playing Encounter Scrying is one of those things that is hard to play solo and be successful at, because again, there's just so many card slots that you need to worry about and need to get into. Like, it's like you said, it's what cards aren't you playing because this card is in there. Although I think with the new Grey Wanderer contract out, I think that this card is definitely going to see some new light. So I think I'm going to have to give this card 6 rings for that reason. So everybody, why don't you join us again as we talk about more cards from the game. Have a great day. And if you're interested in finding this or any of our back episodes of Card Talk, feel free to search YouTube, where you can find our flagship video episodes with the username Card Talk 2018. Or you can search the RSS feed, cardtalk2018.libsyn.org, for our extended audio versions of our podcast. Or you can find us on Facebook at Card Talk 2018. And if you have any questions for Grant or myself, or for both of us, feel free to email us at cardtalk2018@gmail.com.